Hey, what's up? Welcome to live stream number 63. 63. 63, 63, 63. I'm just waiting to see. Oh, there we go. Just waiting to confirm that we do have this live. Hey, how's everybody doing there today on this fine Friday afternoon? It's a little rainy out here in Austin, so what are you going to do? It is what it is. Okay, a couple topics lined up for today. For starters, I want to talk about the idea of being underpaid. I talk a lot about. I think that a lot of employers are like tell me I'm inflating prices and things like that, costs for developers. So I get it from both sides. I get it from people telling me, people charge too much, people charge too little, whatever. But so normally I feel like I'm on the side of like, hey, charge as much money as you can, make as much as making more money I think is a good thing. I saw an interesting blog post from Nathan Barry recently on talking about value, and in his particular case he mentioned a certain product that they like. It's a good product, but they're always charging. This particular product is always increasing their prices relatively aggressively, so that there's not really a discrepancy in like the value and the price that you pay. So anytime the value improves, they increase their prices. So so in the sense it's fair because you're getting what you're paying for. But there's something nice about leaving some money on the table in a sense of like, the product keeps getting better and better, and then the price doesn't necessarily always increase. There's more. It's good to have a little bit of margin there, because if you're always increasing prices aggressively, then maybe someone's more likely to choose to use another product or something like that. And I think a similar analogy applies whether you're a freelancer or full-time developer. Is it good to be underpaid? Well, no. I mean, nobody wants to be like, I'm underpaid. But the opposite. So technically, if you're not underpaid, you're either paid exactly according to whatever the amount of value you create, or you're overpaid, right? Those are the only two options. And so, if you're overpaid, that's not a good thing, because that's not going to be sustainable in the long term. And, if you're paid, first of all, it's not really possible, right, to be paid exactly the amount of the value you create, because if you get better at your job tomorrow than you were yesterday, then then if you were not underpaid yesterday, then today you're now underpaid, right? So it's kind of a weird theoretical discussion, but the point is that sometimes it's good to be underpaid, because there's just more margin there to work with. I sometimes see developers who are pretty aggressively changing jobs and bumping their salary up, and then they're kind of at the high end of the salary range. And I think that's cool. Like, if you can do that, I think that's great. But it is harder to find, jobs for people in that category. It's still possible. But then, you do run into people who are at the higher end of the range, and it's harder for them to find stuff, basically. So yeah, just some thoughts on that. Thoughts on that topic. Okay. What else? This is on the topic of hiring. So this is something I've seen happen. I've heard this from different people. I've seen it happen to myself personally. And it is that when you hire someone, one of the patterns I've observed is that somebody leaves a company, and then the person, the boss who kind of goes back in and picks things up, is like, oh wow, there are some things that were not quite being done how I would have liked. and so it's interesting that I think 99% of the time, when we hire people, we're not really that thorough about okay, what are the KPIs that let me know that this person is on target with X, Y, and Z? I think a lot of times as small business owners, we are kind of looking at the big picture. And if like overall revenue is moving in the right direction, then we're kind of like, okay, cool. And there's no like major problems. Nothing's on fire. We're like, okay, cool. Right. So it's almost like if things are going well, you could have a particular person who you hire who, things going well in general could potentially sort of mask problems that you could have with, an individual person. And so, yeah, it kind of blows me away the extent to which when we hire people, we don't always know exactly what they're doing, and we don't have a lot of good metrics on how to know what's going on. And these things can happen for a really long time. Like I've talked to people who are like, oh yeah, like I looked into what was going on. This person was like very unproductive or very X, Y, and Z for like a year, and it's like, wow. It's like you would think people would catch that earlier, but things can really, like, again, if things are going well overall, you could have a given person who is having some significant, possibly negative impacts on the business or just not a lot of productivity, and you might just not see it at all for like a long time. So I think that to the extent that you can have good systematic way of measuring productivity, I think that's one of the keys to remote, is that like we focus on, like, instead of like is the button the seat, it's about what's the output we're looking for, what are the KPIs that we're looking for, and really focusing on those and tracking those. So I think there's some overlap there, but yeah, I mean, for to the extent we can key in on what are the KPIs for each person we hire and keep an eye on them, I think that'd be great. All right. Next up, I got a question. When should you put a stop work order for non-payment? I've talked about this before from the context of, dealing with clients collecting payment can be a pain in the butt. I think that to the extent we can get prepayments, I think that's the way to go. I know it's not always standard. Net 30 is very standard in a lot of industries, and in our industry in particular, particularly if you're working with bigger clients. And so, but just yesterday I was seeing some tweets on this, and was one of the guys who was responding, who runs a Shopify agency, was saying that they moved everything to prepaid for new customers, and that it worked really well. So I really think that's the way to go. I've talked to other agencies about this kind of thing. One of the other agencies I know that runs a pretty tight ship, they stop work after 5 days of an invoice being overdue with prepaid retainers. I think that's a great model. This is one of those things that it's going to be hard to change your status quo if your status quo is net 60 or net 30. And if you normally, give some budge room if they're late on that, it's going to be hard for you to want to change this, because some people might not go for it. You have to be in a, negotiate it. Like the best way to give yourself, and this is negotiation, because if clients are used to net 90, net 60, that's what they're going to want. That's what they're going to ask for. So it's a negotiation, and you're always in a better position to negotiate if you don't need, if you can walk away, right? So to the extent that you can tell your clients, hey, this is our new policy, and without being obviously rude about it, you want to respect existing relationships and maybe carve out some exceptions. But once you decide on what to carve out, what not to carve out, to the extent that you can say, hey, this is the policy, and if you're not interested with it, totally cool. To the extent you can walk away, that puts you in a stronger position to negotiate. And again, if you look into this, there's lots of examples of agencies that have gone this route and just had great results. So I think it. So to answer the question, when should you put a stop work order? Man, I think I like the idea of 5 days. Seems pretty. if it was me, I'd really want to run a relatively tight ship on this stuff because you're essentially financing clients. Even as standard as Net 30 is, it's like microfinance. You're microfinancing clients for 30 days. And as an agency, as a freelancer, you have enough problems to solve without having to solve cash flow and financing, right? But you have to recruit talent. You have to, take fuzzy requirements from a client into an actual working product, which those, you gotta do project management. Those things in and of themselves are very hard to do. When you throw cash flow and essentially financing on top of it, it can create a real train wreck. So I would just take that out of the equation if at all possible, and essentially have extremely short time frames for putting a stop work order. Okay, and then last up, I was thinking about remote work adoption of remote work, and it's one of those things that is, like the future is unevenly distributed. So remote work is here, but it's unevenly distributed. There's a lot of companies that still aren't really adopting it heavily, for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people feel like, I need to have somebody in the office so that we can have a team environment. A lot of there's accounting issues and things like that, things to work out. And what occurred to me today was the adoption curve for remote work is actually kind of similar to the adoption curve for the internet itself. Like, think about things like buying stuff over the internet, right? You're buying something remotely over the internet. And in the past, it was like, well, I want to buy something in person. I want to look that person in the eye. I want to see the body language. I want to know that I can trust them. And like buying something over the internet was like, whoa, that feels uncomfortable. It's the same thing with hiring remote. It's like, oh, working with somebody who's so many time zones away, who I haven't met in person, that feels uncomfortable, right? And yet at the same time, there's a massive wave of remote work. I mean, I saw some statistics on this recently, and it's pretty incredible, the growth of remote work. And it's just inevitable. I mean, it's for the same reasons it was inevitable that people would move into cities to work in factories. It's inevitable that remote work will continue to pick up steam because of the underlying economics. But that's what occurred to me today, is that it's really like the adoption curve of the internet itself. And it'll take time, but it's going to continue to mature over the coming years. And, eventually it's going to, like, we look back at people in like 10 years ago who were like, nah, I don't think the internet's going to work out. And then, like, people that say, I don't think remote work is for me. I think that we're going to look back, and those statements are going to look as awkward as the statements were about the internet. I think that there are use cases where in-person makes sense. Yes, absolutely. But outside of specific use cases, without specific reasons, I think statements like that are going to look interesting 10 years from now, just because I think it's going to continue to mature over time. So anyways, that's all I got for you today. Thank you for tuning in, and hope you have a great Friday, and I will see you some other time.